So I'm in the process of writing my memoir now. It's called I Could Have Been a Serial Killer, but instead I'm a professor. And the reason for the title is because I have every excuse in the world to be a raving lunatic. I always wondered why I didn't turn out to be Ted Bundy. It was just crazy. When I was a middle-aged woman several years ago, I went to a therapist and I showed him my resume. And by looking at my resume, I should have been the happiest woman in the world. I had 2 lovely kids, a home, a car. I had a list of publications. I was a very successful professor. But there wasn't a day that went by where I didn't feel like killing myself. I couldn't explain it. I felt things that were illogical, and I couldn't feel things that I knew existed. I couldn't feel love, for example, from my family, even though I knew that they loved me. So I went into this therapist's office and I said, I can't live like this any longer. I just can't. I am the hardest working woman that you'll ever meet in your life. I will give you 2 years of my life to do whatever you tell me to do, but I'm done. My son had just turned 5. It turns out that he triggered everything. By that, I'm a sexual abuse survivor. I was sexually abused from the ages of 5 to 6 by a neighbor in heinous ways. I was again violated at the age of 9, again at 11 by people I should have trusted. I had a mother who was a legalized drug addict, 2 emotionally unavailable parents. My life was a mess. So when I got done with my therapy, I remember I had done everything right. I said to my therapist, I looked down, I go, are there ways that we can help teenagers who have emotional pain? Is there something that we can do for them? Right about that time, I had a teacher who was coming over for dinner. And one thing about teachers, I can tell you this, they're always on time. And this teacher was really late, and this is before cell phones. So I couldn't just call her up and say, hey, where are you? So I did something that I never thought I would do. I got in my car to go look for her. And there was this accident on the road. And I did what I never do also. I got out of my car, went across the street, and fortunately it was not my teacher friend, but unfortunately it was the mother and her 2 children. A drunk driver had broadsided her, killing her 7-year-old daughter, and her 4-year-old daughter lived. But I saw all this. So here are the mother's coping strategies. What the mother, I can't imagine. Remember, my son's 5 at this point. I'm thinking to myself, Jesus, a mother, I don't know that I'd survive the death of my kid. She's going to read about this stuff. Her therapist is going to give her some medications, perhaps. She's going to journal about her feelings. He's going to encourage her to tell her story. And somebody needs to witness to her. As a friend, you're just going to hug her and let her cry. You're not going to say, I've already heard that, it's time to move on. You let her tell her story a gazillion times over and over and over again as long as she has to, am I right? But I thought about this 4-year-old. In real life, the 7-year-old was this 4-year-old's best friend. As people, we are born with the same emotions. And I thought to myself, geez, how is this 4-year-old going to cope? She doesn't have the language that her mother has. So, you know what the answers are. She's going to act out, right? Check this out. Almost half of our prisoners don't even have a GED. Their high school drops out. They're the illiterate side of our population. Or she's going to withdraw. And by this slide, you can see that our homeless people aren't exactly Rhodes Scholars. I also read a book at that time by Helen Keller. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. It's called The Story of My Life. She describes it this way. She describes her emotions as being one swirling mass of emotion that made no sense whatsoever. She'd feel this, she'd feel that, but she didn't have a word to describe those feelings, so she was really frustrated until Annie Sullivan taught her words where she could communicate her feelings. So I wonder about students. You know, you guys, 25% of you have inordinate emotional stuff going on. Not necessarily because of your fault, but you know, you may be living with your own situations. God help us if you're abused. I hope not, but about 25% of our kids are abused in some way, shape, or form. So I know that I'm not alone up here when I talk about this. These kids are the kids who are 12 going on 40. Some kids choose badly to escape their pain. Heck, I wrote a book on it, you know, about all the escapes that kids can choose. So these are the unhealthy quick fixes. You can take it to the bank, and I'm not going to ask you to raise your hands, but typically I'll say if you or you know of somebody who takes drugs or engages in alcohol as a way to escape pain, then your life is going to get worse before it gets better. You can take it to the bank. Rampant sex. You know, it feels good to be wrapped up in somebody's arms. And guys, I know what your reputation is. You know, you sleep with a girl and you sleep with many of them, you're known as a stud. Of course, girls who sleep around are not known as that. They're called whores or sluts. And I say to guys, I go, is that really what you're going to call? Is this really calling love? And ladies, if this is your means of escaping pain, there's all kinds of things that can face you. Unwanted pregnancy, that's a whole nother. If you're a teenager who gets pregnant, you're going to be on welfare. Pretty much statistically it shows that. You're going to be poor. We study the people who aren't. If you get pregnant as a teenager, there are success stories, but those are the outliers. Those are the exceptions, not the rule. So that is an unhealthy quick fix to a bigger problem. If you feel loved at home and life is good, you don't feel the need to have sexual partners one right after the other. Gangs and violence. You're mad. You're mad at the world. Other people who are mad at the world can relate to how you're mad at the world. So, hey, join a gang. Be violent. Beat up somebody. Tear up something to get out all that anger. Eating disorders. This is an unhealthy quick fix. Your life's out of control, so you control what you want to eat. And finally, suicide. This is the ultimate quick fix. It's a permanent, as they say, a permanent solution to a temporary problem. So I changed the question around, and I went, you know what? When I look back at my life, what were the decisions that I made? I didn't sleep around. I didn't get involved with drugs or alcohol. I just wanted to kill myself every day of my life. But I went, how did I get to be where I am? So arts and crafts. The bad news, not required in schools. People who have artistic flares, they get it out on the canvas. That's how they can express. Music and dance, not required in schools. A belief in a higher power. There's actually research that Catholics and Jewish folks, because they believe that if you kill yourself, I'm Catholic, by the way, maybe that had something to do with my not killing myself, that a belief in a higher power is a way to keep you sane and on the planet. But that's not allowed in schools. Athletics, we know about endorphins that pass. You may want to beat up somebody, so go out on a football field and tackle somebody, right? Exposing all these natural endorphins. But in our school systems, if you don't pass, you don't play. Doing for others, service learning. What they'll tell you is that if you think your life is bad, go out and do something for somebody else, and you can see that your life is probably better than a lot of other people. But of course, this is reserved for the good kids. The kids who have reputations in schools aren't usually allowed to do service activities to make themselves feel better. So what's left? Writing. Journaling is a good thing. Standardized tests are taking over our curriculum, leaving you less time to write. Reading. Media specialists are being laid off. That's a taxpayer decision. So when you guys get able to vote, make sure that you keep media specialists around. There are also censorship groups. The thing that I am so proud about is that my children were 12 going on 13. They were not 12-year-olds going on 40. And the reason for that was because books saved my life and theirs too. I read how to be a parent. When I was born, my mother used to say, well, when you were born, you weren't born with a manual. Well, nowadays, there are books on how to raise children. And my kids are very, very happy, and we have a great relationship. And I'm happy now. But I just don't want you all to have to wait until you're in your middle-aged years to find that happiness. So I'm here to tell you that books saved my life. Whenever I had my nose in a book, I was safe. It made me smart. It gave me lots to practice. So my message to you is to read. We don't always have a choice about what happens to us, but most always we can choose how we respond to life's problems. This is by Chris Crutcher. And he is a wonderful author. I encourage you to look him up for any of his books to get a good insight on kids. I also wrote a series of books. I wanted to give free therapy, so if you're interested in some free therapy, what I did is I asked literacy people such as myself to go out and find a therapist, find out what the therapist's expertise was, and said, okay, I want you to find a book that speaks to that therapist's expertise and have them provide therapy for the young adult protagonist in that book, so you can get free therapy on all these issues. And finally, the book that was mentioned earlier is called Dear Author, Letters of Hope. I'm friends with a lot of young adult authors, and I asked them to give me 5 to 10 letters that kids had written to them that they couldn't throw away because it was a piece of each kid's soul, and how can you get rid of a kid's soul? You can't. That resonated with these authors, so they gave me 5 to 10 letters. I wrote a composite letter that sounded like one individual and protected the identities of all of these kids, and the author wrote a letter of hope so that the kid would face another day. So here's the bottom line. I believe that authors and teachers are the unsung heroes of you guys. So if you've got some issues, please talk to your teachers, read a book until you get to be the age when you can get help that you need to address those issues. Thank you.